Over the last few years, it seems to me that Class D amplifiers, and even more these tiny little desktop-style amplifiers, have been all the rage for audiophiles on a budget, and look, who can blame them? If it's true that a couple of Benjamins can get us into the driver's seat of high-end sound without breaking the bank, then why in the world would anyone complain? And what is there to complain about? And with a warm welcome back to New Record Day, that's exactly what we're going to find out. The Fosi Audio V3 is a stereo integrated amplifier that is made in China and costs $89 to $139 based on which power supply that you decide to pair with it. The unit is rather small but also feels robust in the hands, and there is no sign of plastic being used on the chassis at all. The front of the amplifier offers a knob for powering the amp, and of course volume control, and last, there is a small LED confirmation on the left of the dial to confirm power. On the business end of the amp, you will find a pair of single-ended RCA inputs and a preamp output if you wanted to run the V3 as a preamp and bypass the power section. To the right of this output, you will find a bank of speaker terminals using these teeny tiny little binding posts. For those who plan to use these with spade connectors or bare wire, I wish you luck, and I think you're going to need it. Not only did I break one of the plastic jackets on mine, and I had to glue it back together when I was trying to fasten down the spade connectors, but I could never get bare wire or spades to even stay in place as I was messing around with this amplifier. So look, I'm not gonna pull any punches here, and I'm gonna make it very clear, these binding posts are junk. And I think Fosi Audio would be wise to come up with larger terminals or a more useful connection to begin with. Last, to the right of the speaker terminals, you will find an inlet jack for the included power supply. The Douk Audio A100 is a stereo amplifier that is made in China and costs $199. The unit is wider and taller than the Fosi V3, but certainly isn't large by any stretch of the imagination. The amp is much heavier than the V3, and the body of the chassis doubles for heat dissipation. The front of the amplifier offers a switch to the left, which powers the amp in mono or stereo mode, and a second switch to change the amp to work with full range speakers or engage a low pass filter to make the amp suitable for passive subwoofers. When the subwoofer mode is engaged, the knob labeled as Super Bass increases or decreases the low end of the amplifier, while the following knob allows the user to dial in the crossover that they want for better integration with their speakers. The next knob on the amplifier controls the volume of the auxiliary output on the amplifier, and the last knob controls the master volume of the amplifier. Taking a look at the business end, you will find a pair of single-ended RCA jacks, an auxiliary output jack, and a bank of speaker terminals. While these terminals are a little bit smaller than standard size posts, they are way more sturdy than the jacks on the Fosi Audio V3 and will work with spade connectors and bare wire without too much trouble. And last, to the right of this bank, there is an inlet jack for the included power supply. So these amplifiers, if looking at specs and what is lurking under the hood, have more in common than one might think. Both of them use the same TPA3255 chipset, which on paper, sit down, you're gonna need to, can get you a staggering 300 watts into 4 ohms, and yes, that's in stereo mode. So yes, both channels driven. I know, it's crazy to think that these tiny little boxes can even come close to that sort of firepower. And look, if I was smart enough to measure amplifiers and I had the proper gear to do so, I would certainly be first in line to do some fact checking. Either way, the 300 watt rating is only possible with the 48 volt 10 amp power supply, but in the case of both of these amplifiers, the manufacturer sent me the 48 volt 5 amp power supply. So we're just gonna have to settle for 260 watts of max power per channel. Well, shucks, what are we gonna do now? Besides the chipset, both of these amps also have another thing in common, which is the ability to pop the hood and swap out the op amps to your liking. While I'm not going to be doing a deep dive into this particular option on this video, and depending on how much you guys actually care about any of this stuff, I might actually do a follow-up video and see where we land when we give this a try. In the meantime, the op amps that I'm using in both of these amps are the ones that came with the stock units, and for those curious, both of these amps do indeed come with the exact same op amp, which is the NE5532 op amp. Now, as we have already seen, there are some differences between these two amps in terms of flexibility, and for those who are interested in using these amps for a passive subwoofer, there is only one clear winner, which is of course the Douk Audio. But other than the feature set, and knowing the chipset and op amps is identical in both of these amps, one might think they sound exactly the same. And would you believe it? They don't. And to me, one is clearly better than the other at some things, while the other is better at, well, other things. So yeah, into the audiophile rabbit hole we go. The V3 is lively, peppy, and it sounds very punchy and even at times explosive in bass. It did not take long trying out this amp with this prototype speaker that is slowly turning into a reality that it occurred to me that this amp is indeed powerful and that 260 watts might actually be true. While not the hardest to drive speaker in the world, these guys aren't super sensitive. They're rated around 6 ohms, around 85 decibels, so these do need a little bit of love to get them to really sing, and the V3 had no issues bringing the appropriate firepower. Now, with these speakers, the V3 sounded very good in bass response, very good in the hard and mid-range, and not bad on top, or more specifically, treble response. I know that last statement piqued some interest, and it's going to be the only kryptonite when it comes to this little V3, and it's the only reason that I can't totally endorse this little amplifier. With a smooth or forgiving top end, the amp's top end isn't bad. Cymbal hits can still sound a little bit chalky and forward, and at times it's a little bit aggravating and annoying, but at times it's passable. And with these prototype speakers, the top end is being handled by a pair of 3-inch wideband drivers, one in the front and one in the back. And while it has no issue playing out to 20K, it's not the most analytical or detailed top end on the planet. So because of this combo works fine with this amplifier, and I think that it would be a pretty good bet for anybody who wants to hear what hi-fi is all about. The top end is going to be 50-50, but it's passable. But the second that I swapped out these speakers out for Caladan, which is absolutely unforgiving in the top end, it's going to tell you the truth, I went from getting by with this amp to anxiously waiting for the song to end. And maybe I'm being dramatic, maybe not, but the reality is this. I am not a huge fan of how this amplifier sounds on top, and I think that when paired with a speaker that is very resolving, it's just a forward, chalky, bright, and in-your-face kind of performance that I just can't find myself calling enjoyable for more than even a minute. So, with the little V3, the bass performance is impressive, powerful and punchy, and will probably be the thing that most audiophiles appreciate when plugging this thing in and letting it rip. The heart of the midband, or being more specific, most vocal content is also good, if not excellent. But keep in mind, that is going to be speaker dependent, and I would be concerned that with a high-resolution speaker, you might find the top end of this amp making its way into the upper harmonics of female vocals, and it might not be all that in a bag of chips. And last, the top end. Well, if your speaker is neutral or forgiving with top-end resolution, the V3 certainly might fit the bill. In the event where your speaker has a rise in the response or has some kind of stored energy or is just great at revealing every single detail, I just can't bring myself to recommending this amplifier for that particular scenario, but you do whatever you want. I'm just reporting what I hear. The Douk Audio A100 isn't as peppy as the V3, and the bass performance doesn't sound quite as explosive as well. However, there is indeed a trade-off. The Douk Audio's bass sounds more textured and refined. So, leaning into the sound of a kick drum goes from being explosive and maybe one-notish with the V3 to something less explosive, but to my ears, more complex and harmonically rich. Now, when it comes to the mid-range or the heart of mid-range, it's almost a tie between these two amps if we're only talking about tone, which I think is probably close if not the same. However, the A100 does indeed do something that I appreciate so much more than the V3 that for me, it takes the trophy even with the tone being the same. When I listen to both of these amps and I go back and forth, I keep noticing something really interesting that's probably closer related to staging or decay structure than anything else. And the bottom line is this: the A100 sounds more at ease. While this is certainly true in bass, it's also true in the mid-range and absolutely true about the top-end performance. With vocals, whether it's male or female, I consistently get a sense of the singer at the microphone, and regardless of their pitch, they always sound in their proper place with the A100. With the V3, depending on the pitch, there are times that some parts of their voice can sound more forward than the body of their voice, or parts of their voice sound detached from other parts, which can break the perfect illusion of a proper sounding stage. I think that when audiophiles say something to the effect of, "This amp can sound a little bit forward," this is exactly what I'm describing with the V3's performance. Early on in my audiophile journey, I would always confuse this sound for details and even favor it over another amp that in comparison, at least in the first few minutes, might sound boring or missing something than the more exciting amplifier had to offer. Little did I know that this detail wasn't actually part of the music signal, and what I was hearing was actually a characteristic of the amplifier itself. In the case of the V3, I think this is what's going on, and to me, the A100 presents the entire high-fidelity puzzle in a more complete and correct manner than the V3, making it superior in my book. And last, and you probably already know how this is going to play out, the A100's top end is also more relaxed than the V3, and while it's not perfect and I still hear things that could certainly be better, it's pleasant enough to get a thumbs up. Cymbal hits, even with Caladan, are more natural sounding, and the top end of female vocals don't sound like they are being crammed down my throat. All in all, I believe the A100 is just a better performer across the entire audio spectrum, and it sounds more refined than the V3 from Fosi Audio. But hey, don't take my word for it. Here are some sound clips that you can check out for yourself.
Engineer, where are you headed? Engineer, where are you headed?
No hubiera pensado que yo me iba a enamorar, jamás no quería saber nada más, nunca más. No hubiera pensado que yo me iba a enamorar, jamás no quería saber nada más, nunca más.
So there you have it, folks. Both of these little amplifiers are compelling in so many ways. They are very small, very simple to use, and very powerful. Both of them have the option of potentially changing their presentation with different op amps, and I must admit, I'm tempted to cross that bridge, especially with the V3, to see if I can move that needle in a more relaxed direction. In stock form, I definitely prefer the A100, and while it's more expensive than the V3, it is superior to me enough in sonic categories for me to declare it the winner and the overall champion of these two budget amplifiers. And with that, I will see you cheap and cheerful audiophiles in the next video. Hi.
Were you recording?
Yeah, it's okay.
It said go.
It's okay. Okay.
Okay.
I love you.
Love you too.
Do you want to kiss me?
No, it's okay. You're filming.
You can come and kiss me.
You want it. We better not end up in a review.
Come and kiss me. Kiss me. Bye.